My wife's Muslim healer came completely covered. She was Muslim. I did not see her face, but each time her shoe size was different. Let me start from the beginning. My name is David Henderson, and this is a story of how I lost everything I thought I knew about the woman I've been married to for 15 years. The glass shattered against the kitchen wall, red wine bleeding down the white paint like an open wound. My wife, Sarah, stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale as chalk, clutching the doorframe as if it was the only thing keeping her upright. "I can't take this anymore, David," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of my heavy breathing. "The pain, it's killing me." That was 3 months before the healer came into our lives. 3 months since my healthy, vibrant wife of 15 years had started wasting away before my eyes. 3 months of doctors, specialists, and medical bills that were draining our savings faster than water through a broken dam. Nobody could figure out what was wrong with her. The doctors ran every test known to modern medicine. Blood work, MRIs, CT scans, biopsies, you name it, we did it. Each time, the same answer. "Everything looks normal, Mrs. Henderson. We can't find anything physically wrong." But Sarah wasn't normal. She had lost 30 pounds in 2 months. Her once shiny brown hair had turned dull and lifeless. Dark circles ringed her eyes like bruises. She spent most days curled up in bed, too weak to do much more than sip water and nibble on crackers. I watched the woman I loved disappear piece by piece, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. "It's not in your head," I told her every day, even when a doubt crept into my own mind. The doctors kept suggesting depression, anxiety, stress-related disorders. But I knew my wife. This wasn't some mental breakdown. Something real was eating her alive from the inside. That's when her cousin Maria called with what she claimed was the answer to our prayers. "There's this woman," Maria said over the phone, her voice excited and breathless. "She's a healer, a spiritual healer. My friend Rosa went to her when the doctors couldn't help with her stomach problems, and she was completely cured in 3 weeks. I rolled my eyes so hard it hurt. "Maria, we don't need so much doctor." "She's not a witch doctor, David. She's Muslim, very religious, very respectful. She uses traditional healing methods, herbal remedies, spiritual cleansing, and she's helped so many people in our community." "Our community?" I asked, confused. Maria lived in the suburbs, just like us. As far as I knew, we didn't have much of a Muslim community around here. "Well, she travels. She has clients all over the city. Look, I know you're skeptical, but what do you have to lose? The doctors aren't helping Sarah. At least this woman might try something different." I was about to hang up when I heard Sarah's weak voice from the bedroom. "David, who is it?" I covered the phone and walked to our bedroom. Sarah was propped up against 3 pillows, looking like a ghost of herself. Her cheekbones stood out sharp against her sunken cheeks. "It's Maria. She knows someone who might be able to help you. A healer." Sarah's eyes lit up for the first time in weeks. "Really? What kind of healer?" I sighed and sat on the edge of the bed. "Some Muslim woman who does spiritual healing or something. Maria says she's helped other people with mysterious illnesses." "David," Sarah grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "I'll try anything. Please. I can't live like this anymore." Looking into her desperate eyes, I felt my resistance crumble. What did we have to lose? The medical establishment had failed us completely. Maybe it was time to try something different, no matter how strange it seemed. "Okay," I said, bringing the phone back to my ear. "Maria, set it up. The healer," Fatima was her name, agreed to come to our house the following Tuesday. Maria explained that Fatima preferred to work in the patient home environment, where their spiritual energy was strongest. She charged $300 per session, which seemed steep, but at that point I would have paid anything. "There are just a few things you need to know," Maria said. "Fatima is very traditional. She wears full Islamic dress, the black robe and face covering. She doesn't speak much English, but she understands it fine, and she needs complete privacy during the healing sessions. No men allowed in the room." "What exactly does she do in these sessions?" I asked. "Spiritual cleansing, energy work, herbal treatments. I don't know all the details, but Rosa said it involved a lot of prayer and some kind of laying on of hands. Very sacred stuff." I wasn't thrilled about having a stranger perform mysterious rituals on my wife behind closed doors, but Sarah was so excited about the possibility of getting better that I kept my concerns to myself. Tuesday arrived cold and gray, with the kind of October rain that makes everything look miserable. I had taken a day off work to be home when Fatima arrived, partly out of curiosity and partly because I didn't feel comfortable leaving Sarah alone with a complete stranger. At exactly 2 o'clock, there was a soft knock at our front door. I opened it to find a figure that looked like something from another world. She was completely covered in black fabric from head to toe. The only part her eye could see was her eyes, which were dark and serious above the black cloth that covered the rest of her face. She wore what looked like a long black dress or robe that went down to her ankles, and black gloves covered her hands. "Fatima?" I asked. She nodded silently and stepped inside, carrying a large black bag that looked like a doctor's medical case. She was shorter than I expected, maybe 5'4", and moved with a graceful, almost floating quality that was unsettling. "My wife is upstairs," I said, gesturing toward the staircase. "Would you like me to show you?" She held up one gloved hand to stop me and shook her head. Then she pointed to herself and then upstairs, clearly indicating she knew where to go. "Okay," I said, feeling awkward. "Sarah's expecting you. Room at the end of the hall." As she glided past me toward the stairs, I glanced down at her feet. She was wearing simple black sandals that looked like they belonged to a small woman, maybe size 6 or 7. They were plain but well made, with delicate straps that seemed almost dainty against the severe black of her outfit. I watched her disappear up the stairs, her footsteps completely silent on the carpeted steps. There was something about her movement that bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. From upstairs, I heard the bedroom door close with a soft click, followed by the unmistakable sound of the lock turning. For the next 2 hours, I sat in the living room trying to watch television, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. The house was completely quiet except for the occasional murmur of voices from upstairs, Sarah's voice, and another voice that was deeper and more musical, speaking in what sounded like Arabic. At 4 o'clock, I heard the bedroom door open and footsteps on the stairs. Fatima appeared in the living room doorway, still completely covered, carrying her black bag. She nodded at me once and moved toward the front door. "Wait," I called out. "How is she? How did it go?" Fatima paused and turned back to me. She pointed upstairs and made a gesture that seemed to indicate everything was fine. Then she pointed herself and held up 3 fingers, followed by pointing at her wrist where a watch would be. 3 days? I asked. "You'll be back in 3 days?" She nodded and left without another word. I rushed upstairs to check on Sarah and found her sitting up in bed, looking more alert than she had in weeks. There was actual color in her cheeks, and her eyes seemed brighter. "How do you feel?" I asked, sitting beside her. "Better," she said, and for the first time in months, she smiled. "Much better. I can't explain it, David, but I feel like something heavy has been lifted off me." "What did she do?" "Prayers, mostly. And she gave me some herbal tea to drink. She has such gentle hands, and her voice is so soothing when she chants." I actually fell asleep for part of it. I looked around the room, expecting to see some evidence of whatever ritual had taken place, but everything looked exactly the same as it had that morning. "Did she say what was wrong with you?" "She doesn't speak much English, but she indicated that my spiritual energy was blocked. Something about negative influences that needed to be cleared away." Sarah stretched her arms above her head, a movement I hadn't seen her make in months. "I know it sounds crazy, but I actually feel hungry for the first time in weeks." That night, Sarah ate a full dinner for the first time since she'd gotten sick. She stayed awake until almost 10 o'clock, watching television with me on the couch. When we went to bed, she didn't immediately curl up in a fetal position like she had been doing for months. Maybe this Fatima woman really was onto something. 3 days later, she returned at exactly the same time. Same black outfit, same silent demeanor, same mysterious bag. But as she walked past me toward the stairs, something caught my attention. Her shoes were different. Instead of the delicate black sandals, she was wearing what looked like men's slippers, large, bulky things that seemed at least 2 sizes bigger than what she'd worn before. They made soft shuffling sounds on the hardwood floor of our entryway. I stared after her as she climbed the stairs, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Had she borrowed someone else's shoes? Were the sandals being repaired? It seemed like such an odd thing to notice, but something about it bothered me. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about those shoes as I drove to work through downtown Denver. Traffic was its usual nightmare on I-25, but my mind kept wandering back to Fatima's feet. Why would someone change from delicate sandals to oversized men's slippers? I tried to focus on the spreadsheets waiting for me at the insurance office, but every time I got stuck at a red light, my thoughts drifted back to our house on Maple Street and the strange woman who had locked herself in our bedroom with my wife. Sarah seemed even better after the second visit. She had gotten up early and made pancakes, actual pancakes, For the first time since July, when I left for work, she was talking about maybe driving to Target later to pick up some groceries. The old Sarah was coming back, and I should have been thrilled. So, why did I feel like something was wrong? That evening, I called my buddy Mike from the office. Mike lived over in Lakewood and had grown up Muslim before converting to Christianity in college. If anyone could help me make sense of the situation, it would be him. So let me get this straight, Mike said over the phone. This healer woman comes to your house completely covered up, locks herself in the bedroom with Sarah, and you've never seen her face? That's right. And Maria, Sarah's cousin who recommended her, says that's normal for traditional Muslim women. It can be, Mike said slowly. But here's the thing, Dave. Most healers, even traditional ones, don't work completely alone with patients. Usually there's some kind of consultation with the family, especially the husband. And this shoe thing you mentioned, that's weird. How so? Religious Muslim women are usually very consistent about their appearance. Everything about their dress is intentional. Changing shoes like that, it doesn't make sense. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. What are you saying? I'm not saying anything definitive. But if I were you, I'd want to know more about this Fatima person. Has Sarah asked her any questions? Like where she's from, how long she's been practicing, anything like that? I don't think so. Sarah said she doesn't speak much English. Mike was quiet for a moment. Dave, I've lived all over Colorado, Denver, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins. The Muslim communities here are pretty tight-knit. If there was a traveling healer with Fatima's reputation, I'd probably know about her. Want me to ask around? Yeah, I said. That would be great. 2 days later, Mike called me back with troubling news. I talked to friends at 3 different mosques in the Denver area, the one on Federal Boulevard, the Islamic Center in Aurora, and the big one down in Castle Rock. Nobody's heard of a healer named Fatima who matches your description. My blood ran cold. Are you sure? I describe her exactly like you told me. Traditional dress, travels to homes, specializes in mysterious illnesses. Nothing. One imam said he'd be concerned about any so-called healer who insisted on complete privacy with patients. What does that mean? It means legitimate Islamic healing usually involves community, family involvement, transparency, locking doors and working in secret. That's not how it's typically done. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Sarah, who was sleeping better than she had in months, and tried to make sense of what Mike had told me. Who was this woman coming into our house? What was she really doing with my wife? The third visit happened the following Friday. I had taken a half day off work, telling my boss I had a dentist appointment. But really I want to be home when Fatima arrived. I needed to pay closer attention this time. She showed up at exactly 2 o'clock, just like before. Same black outfit, same silent demeanor. But as she walked past me in our entryway, I made sure to get a good look at her feet. This time, she was wearing expensive-looking high heels. Designer shoes that probably cost more than I made in a week. They were black leather with silver buckles, and they clicked authoritatively on our hardwood floor as she headed for the stairs. "Excuse me," I called out, and she turned back to face me. I pointed to her shoes and then made a questioning gesture with my hands. She tilted her head like she didn't understand what I was asking. "Different shoes," I said slowly. "Every time different shoes. Why?" For just a moment, I thought I saw something flicker in her dark eyes above the face covering. Surprise? Annoyance? But then she simply shrugged and continued up the stairs. This time, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I followed her. Not all the way upstairs. I wasn't ready for that level of confrontation. But I positioned myself at the bottom of the staircase where I could hear better. The bedroom door closed and locked as usual, but I strained to listen to what was happening above me. At first, it was the same as before. Sarah's voice and the deeper voice speaking in Arabic. But after about 30 minutes, I heard something that made my skin crawl. Laughter. Male laughter. It was brief, maybe just a few seconds, but it was definitely the sound of a man laughing. A deep, masculine chuckle that was nothing like the musical voice I'd heard during the healing chants. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, my heart pounding. Had I imagined it? Was my paranoia making me hear things that weren't there? 20 minutes later, I heard it again. This time it was joined by what sounded like Sarah giggling, actually giggling, in a way I hadn't heard since we were newlyweds. My hands started shaking. What the hell was going on in my bedroom? I crept halfway up the stairs, trying to get closer to the door, without making noise. The old house creaked under my weight, and I froze, waiting to see if anyone had heard me. But the voices continued, now speaking in hushed tones that I couldn't make out. Then I heard something that made my blood turn to ice. The unmistakable sound of bed springs. Not violent or rhythmic. Just a soft squeak of someone shifting position on our mattress. But it was a sound I knew intimately after 15 years of marriage, and it sent a wave of nausea through me. I backed down the stairs as quietly as I could and went to the kitchen, where I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and drank it in one gulp. My mind was racing with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was my wife having an affair? Was this healer actually a man dressed in women's clothing? Was I losing my mind? The session ended at the usual time. I heard the bedroom door open and footsteps on the stairs. I positioned myself in the living room where I could see Fatima as she left, trying to look casual while studying her every movement. She paused in the doorway and looked at me for a long moment. Those dark eyes seemed to be evaluating me, like she was trying to decide something. Then she reached into her black bag and pulled out a small glass vial filled with what looked like tea. She set it on the coffee table and pointed to it, then pointed upstairs toward Sarah, making a drinking motion with her hand. "For my wife?" I asked. She nodded once, then turned and left without another word. But as she walked away, I noticed something else about those expensive high heels. They left small scuff marks on our hardwood floor near the front door. I rushed upstairs to check on Sarah and found her in the bathroom, looking at herself in the mirror. She was actually applying lipstick, something she hadn't done since she got sick. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "Wonderful," she said, and she really did look wonderful. Her color was good, her eyes were bright, and she seemed to have more energy than she'd had in months. Fatima says I'm making excellent progress. The spiritual blockages are clearing up. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Have you ever seen Fatima's face?" Sarah paused with the lipstick halfway to her lips. "What do you mean?" I mean, has she ever taken off that face covering when she's working with you?" "No," Sarah said slowly. "That would be inappropriate. She's very religious. David, very traditional. And you're okay with that? Not knowing what she looks like?" Sarah turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression that I didn't recognize. A kind of secretive smile that made me uncomfortable. "David, does it matter what she looks like? She's helping me get better. For the first time in months, I feel like myself again. Isn't that what's important?" That night, after Sarah had gone to sleep, I sat in the kitchen and stared at the vial Fatima had left. The liquid inside was dark brown and smelled like herbs when I opened it. But there was something else in the scent, something sweet and almost medicinal that I couldn't identify. I thought about pouring it down the drain. Every instinct I had was telling me that something was very wrong with this whole situation. The changing shoes, the male laughter, the secrecy, the fact that no one in the Denver Muslim community had heard of this woman. But then I looked at the framed photo on our kitchen counter. Sarah and me at last year's Christmas party, both of us laughing and healthy and happy. I thought about how sick she'd been just a few weeks ago, how I'd watched her wasting away and felt completely helpless. She was getting better. Whatever was happening upstairs during those sessions, my wife was recovering from an illness that had baffled every doctor in Colorado. How could I interfere with that? I put the vial in the refrigerator and went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I lay there listening to Sarah breathe beside me, steady and peaceful, and tried to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. But I couldn't stop thinking about those shoes. 3 visits, 3 completely different pairs of shoes. And that laughter, definitely male laughter coming from my bedroom. Over the weekend, I found myself paying attention to details I'd never noticed before. Sarah's behavior was different in subtle ways. She was healthier, yes, but there were other changes too. She had started locking her phone, something she'd never done in our entire marriage. When I asked her about it, she said she was trying to be more careful about privacy, but she wouldn't meet my eyes when she said it. She had also started wearing perfume again, but it was a scent I didn't recognize. When I complimented her on it, she said she'd picked it up at the mall, but I'd been to every perfume counter in Cherry Creek and Park Meadows, and I'd never smelled anything like it. Most disturbing of all, she had started praying. Sarah had been raised Catholic, but hadn't been to church since we got married. Now, several times a day, I would find her kneeling on a small rug in our bedroom, facing what I assumed was east, moving her lips in silent prayer. "It's part of the healing process," she explained when I asked about it. "Fatima taught me that spiritual health and physical health are connected. The prayers help maintain the balance she's creating." Are you converting to Islam?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "No," Sarah said quickly. It's just temporary, just until I'm completely healed. But something in her tone suggested she wasn't being entirely truthful. The following Tuesday, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of going to work, I was going to stay home and find out exactly what was happening in my bedroom. Tuesday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My supervisor at Colorado Mutual Insurance wasn't happy about the short notice, but I told him I had food poisoning and would probably need the whole day to recover. Sarah was in the shower when I made the call, humming something that sounded Middle Eastern. The melody was haunting and beautiful, but I'd never heard her hum anything like it before. When she came out of the bathroom, she was wearing a silk robe I didn't recognize, deep blue with intricate gold patterns that looked expensive. "That's pretty," I said, touching the fabric. "When did you get this?" "Oh, this old thing?" She avoided my eyes. "I've had it for ages. I just haven't felt well enough to wear nice things until now." But I knew every piece of clothing in Sarah's wardrobe. We'd been married for 15 years and shared a walk-in closet. I'd helped her pick out most of her robes and nightgowns over the years. This one was definitely new. "Are you staying home today?" she asked, and I thought I detected a note of concern in her voice. "Just for the morning. Still feeling a little queasy from whatever I ate last night." I studied her face. "Will that be a problem? With Fatima coming, I mean." "No, of course not," she said quickly. "You know she prefers privacy during the sessions, but you being in the house is fine." She kissed my forehead and went downstairs to make coffee. I heard her on the phone a few minutes later, speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't make out the words, but her voice had an urgency to it that made me uneasy. At 1:45, 15 minutes before Fatima's usual arrival time, Sarah came upstairs with a cup of herbal tea. "I made this for you," she said. "It's chamomile and ginger. It should help settle your stomach." The tea smelled wonderful, but something about Sarah's insistence that I drink it right away bothered me. She stood there watching me, waiting for me to take a sip. "Thanks, honey. I'll drink it in a little bit." "It's better when it's hot," she pressed. "Please, David. I want you to feel better." To keep peace, I took a small sip. It tasted fine, soothing, with a slightly sweet aftertaste that reminded me of the herbal mixture Fatima had been leaving for Sarah. "There," I said. "Thank you." Sarah smiled and kissed my cheek. "Why don't you rest in the den? The couch is more comfortable than our bed when you're not feeling well." She was right about that. The leather recliner in our den was my favorite spot when I was sick. But as I settled in with a book and tea, I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah wanted me as far away from the bedroom as possible. At exactly 2 o'clock, I heard the soft knock at the front door. From the den, I had a perfect view through the archway to our entryway. I pretended to be absorbed in my book while watching Sarah answer the door. Fatima entered as silently as always, but this time I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. She was taller than before, noticeably taller. The black fabric of her outfit looked the same, but the person inside, it was clearly different. Where before she had seemed delicate and petite, now she had broader shoulders and a more substantial frame. And her shoes, this time she wore men's dress shoes. Expensive black leather Oxfords that were at least size 11 or 12. Sarah and Fatima exchanged what looked like a meaningful glance before heading upstairs together. For the first time since these sessions had started, Sarah went up to the bedroom with the healer instead of waiting for her there. As soon as I heard the bedroom door close and lock, I crept to the bottom of the stairs with my tea mug, positioning myself where I could hear better. The floorboards creaked softly above me as they moved around the room. Then I heard Sarah's voice, clear and distinct. "He drank the tea. We should have at least 2 hours." My blood turned cold. The tea. She had poisoned the tea. I set the mug down on the hall table and noticed that my hands were already starting to feel slightly numb. Whatever she had put in that chamomile was beginning to work. I felt a wave of drowsiness wash over me, followed by a strange sense of detachment, fighting against the effects of whatever Sarah had given me. I forced myself to focus on the sounds coming from upstairs. The voices were clearer now. Sarah's familiar laugh mixed with a deep male voice that was definitely not the musical Arabic chanting I'd heard before. "God, I've missed you," the male voice said in perfect, unaccented English. "It's only been 3 days," Sarah replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. 3 days too long. My legs nearly gave out. That voice, I knew that voice. It was familiar in a way that made my stomach lurch with recognition, but my poisoned brain couldn't quite place it. I forced myself to climb the stairs, gripping the banister to keep from falling. Each step felt like I was walking through thick mud. The bedroom door was locked, but I pressed my ear against it and listened. David's getting suspicious about the shoes, Sarah was saying. I told you we should be more careful about that, the man replied. Marcus wears a size 12, Jerome's feet are tiny, and Ahmed's got those expensive tastes. It was bound to be noticed eventually. Marcus, Jerome, Ahmed, 3 different names, 3 different men. It doesn't matter now, Sarah said. After today, we won't need to pretend anymore. Are you sure you're ready for that? I've been ready for months. This whole charade has been exhausting. I love David, but he's so predictable, so boring. He thinks taking me to Olive Garden for our anniversary is romantic. Each word hit me like a physical blow. I slumped against the wall, fighting to stay conscious as the poison pulled me deeper into a hazy fog. What about the money? The man asked. All transferred. The insurance policy, the joint savings, even his retirement account. My cousin Maria helped me set up the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. By tomorrow, everything will be moved. The room started spinning. Our savings, my retirement, everything we built together over 15 years. And the house, already in escrow. I forged his signature on the listing papers 2 weeks ago. The buyer is paying cash. They're friends of Ahmed's family. We close on Friday. I tried to stand up, but my legs wouldn't support me. The hallway tilted sideways, and I had to grab the doorframe to keep from falling. You've thought of everything, the man said admiringly. But what if he tries to stop us? How can he? By tomorrow morning, he'll wake up in a hotel room in Kansas City with no memory of how he got there. The Rohypnol will make sure of that. By the time he figures out what happened, we'll be long gone. She was going to poison me unconscious and dump me somewhere hundreds of miles away. Where will you go? The man asked. Morocco first, then maybe Dubai. Ahmed has connections there. We can disappear completely. I heard movement in the room. Footsteps crossing the window, the sound of curtains being drawn. I still can't believe you pulled this off, the man said. The whole Muslim healer thing was genius. It was Ahmed's idea. He said American men are so ignorant about Islam that we could get away with anything as long as we claimed it was religious. And he was right. David never questioned any of it. Even when we rotated who was playing Fatima, especially then, you should have seen his face when he tried to ask about the shoes. He was so confused, but he was too polite to push it, too respectful of other cultures to demand answers. They both laughed, and the sound made me sick to my stomach. Speaking of Ahmed, Sarah continued, he should be here soon with the van. We need to get David moved before the sedative wears off. Van. They were going to load me into a van and drive me to Kansas City while I was unconscious. I tried to think clearly through the fog in my brain. I needed to get out of the house, get to a phone, call the police, but my body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and every movement was a tremendous effort. Using the wall for support, I made my way back down the stairs. Each step felt like I was walking underwater. In the kitchen, I managed to grab my cell phone from the counter, but my fingers were too numb to dial properly. Through the kitchen window, I saw a white panel van pulling into our driveway. The license plate was from New Mexico, and I could see 2 men in the front seats. One was a young Hispanic man with a beard, and the other was a tall black man, wearing what looked like traditional Islamic dress. Marcus, Jerome, Ahmed, the rotating cast of healers who had been seducing my wife under the cover of spiritual healing. I heard footsteps on the stairs and Sarah's voice calling out, David, are you okay down there? I tried to run, but my legs gave out completely. I collapsed onto the kitchen floor just as Sarah appeared in the doorway, no longer wearing the blue silk robe. Instead, she was dressed in jeans and a sweater I'd never seen before, with a large suitcase in one hand and my laptop bag in the other. Oh, David, she said, her voice full of mock sympathy. You don't look well at all. Behind her stood the man who had been playing Fatima, now dressed in regular clothes without the black covering. I recognized him immediately, and the recognition hit me like a punch to the gut. It was Tom Bradley, our next-door neighbor, the man who had moved in 6 months ago, right around the time Sarah had started getting sick, the man who had been so helpful during her illness, bringing over casseroles and offering to help with yard work, the man who had recently started wearing traditional Islamic robes when he went for walks around the neighborhood. Hello, David, Tom said with a sympathetic smile. Don't worry, this will all be over soon. Through the kitchen window, I could see the other 2 men getting out of the van. One carried a canvas tarp, and the other had what looked like a medical bag. Sarah knelt down beside me on the floor and brushed the hair away from my forehead with surprising gentleness. I really did love you, she said quietly. I want you to know that. But I needed more than what you could give me. I needed adventure, excitement, passion. I needed to feel alive again. The illness, I managed to whisper through numb lips, was real at first, but not physical, spiritual. I was dying inside, David. Dying of boredom and routine and predictability. Tom and his friends showed me what I was missing. How long? 4 months. Since right after Tom moved in next door. He introduced me to Marcus and Jerome through his social circle. They taught me about real passion, real spiritual connection. The kind of connection and I never had. I tried to ask about the money, about the house, about 15 years of marriage, but the words wouldn't come. The Rohypnol was pulling me under, and the edges of my vision were turning black. Don't fight it, Sarah said softly. When you wake up, you'll be free too. Free to find someone who can make you happy the way Tom makes me happy. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was the sound of the front door opening and footsteps crossing our hardwood floor. I woke up in a motel room that smelled like stale cigarettes and industrial cleaning fluid. The bedspread was orange and brown, a pattern that screamed 1970s, and the wallpaper was peeling near the water-stained ceiling. Through the thin curtains, I could see the neon sign of a Denny's restaurant flickering in the gray dawn light. My head felt like someone had filled it with concrete, and my mouth tasted like I'd been chewing on cotton balls. When I tried to sit up, the room spun violently, and I had to grab the nightstand to keep from falling off the bed. On the nightstand was a folded piece of paper with my name written on it in Sarah's careful handwriting. With shaking hands, I opened it and read, David, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I know you must hate me, and I understand why. What I did was cruel, but it was also necessary. I've left you enough money to get home. There's $500 cash in your wallet and a bus ticket to Denver. Your car is in the motel parking lot. I'm not completely heartless. I need you to know that my feelings for you were real. 15 years of marriage can't be faked entirely. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being happy. I stopped feeling alive. I tried to tell myself it was enough. The house, the routine, the comfortable predictability of our life together. But it wasn't. Tom showed me what passion really feels like. Marcus taught me about intellectual connection. Jerome opened my eyes to spiritual awakening. Ahmed helped me understand that there's a whole world beyond suburban Denver that I'd never experienced. I know you'll think this was all about money, but it wasn't. Not really. The money was just a means to an end, a way to start over somewhere new. Someone new. Don't try to find me. By the time you get home, everything will be finished. The house will be sold, the accounts will be closed, and I'll be on a plane to a place where we can never be found. I hope someday you'll understand that I did this for both of us. You deserve someone who can love you the way you deserve to be loved. Completely, without reservation, without the constant feeling that something is missing. That person was never going to be me again. I'm sorry, David, for everything. Sarah, I read the letter 3 times before it fully sank in. Then I stumbled to the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left in my stomach. The motel was called the Prairie Inn, and according to the phone book in the nightstand drawer, I was in Hays, Kansas, about 350 miles from home. The desk clerk, a tired-looking woman with gray hair and kind eyes, told me I'd been brought in around midnight by a Hispanic man who said I was his brother and had gotten food poisoning at a wedding. He paid for 3 nights in advance, she said, looking concerned. Said you might need time to recover. Are you feeling better, honey? I checked my wallet and found exactly what Sarah had promised. $500 in cash and a Greyhound ticket to Denver leaving that afternoon. My credit cards were gone, along with my driver's license and insurance cards. But my car keys were in my pocket. In the parking lot, I found my Honda Civic with a full tank of gas and a note on the windshield. Sorry about the inconvenience. T. Tom. Even in his apology, he couldn't resist rubbing salt in the wound. The drive back to Denver took 6 hours, and I spent every mile trying to process what had happened to my life. Yesterday morning, I'd been a married man with a house, a savings account, and a retirement fund. Now I was a divorced man, technically still married, but effectively divorced, with nothing but the clothes on my back and a car that might or might not still be in my name. I pulled into our driveway on Maple Street just as the sun was setting behind the Rocky Mountains. There was a sold sign on the front lawn that hadn't been there 2 days ago, and all the windows were dark. The front door was locked, but I still had my keys. Inside, the The house was completely empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. The furniture, the pictures, the kitchen appliances, even the light fixtures had been removed. Our 15 years of accumulated possessions had vanished as if they'd never existed. In the kitchen, there was another note taped to the bare wall where our refrigerator used to be. The buyer needed to take possession immediately. Everything has been moved to storage. The key is under the fake rock by the mailbox. Unit 247 at Denver Self-Storage on Colfax Avenue. Rent is paid through the end of the month. I kept a few things that I thought you might want. Photo albums, your father's watch, some of your clothes. The rest can be sold or donated. The house closes tomorrow morning. You'll need to be out by noon. S. I sat on the bare kitchen floor and cried for the first time since I was 12 years old. The storage unit contained the remnants of my former life, packed into cardboard boxes with Sarah's methodical labeling system. David's books, wedding photos, kitchen basic items, David's winter clothes. There was also a box labeled Important Documents that contained copies of papers I'd never seen before. The house sale had been finalized 3 weeks ago. Sarah had forged my signature on everything. The listing agreement, the purchase contract, even the deed transfer. The buyer had paid cash for $125,000 for a house we bought for $180,000 10 years ago. Our joint checking account had been emptied the day before I woke up in Kansas. The savings account, the CDs, even my 401k, all of it transferred to accounts in the Cayman Islands that I couldn't access. But the most devastating discovery was in a manila folder at the bottom of the box. Copies of emails between Sarah and Tom dating back 8 months, long before she'd gotten sick. The emails told the real story. Sarah had met Tom through some chance encounter. She'd been actively looking for him, or someone like him, on dating websites for married people seeking affairs. Tom had 3 friends who were part of what they called a collective, a group of men who specialized in seducing unhappy wives and helping them escape their marriages with as much money as possible. They had done this before, at least 6 times in the past 3 years, in different cities across the Southwest. Phoenix, Albuquerque, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Little Rock. Each time, they'd target a specific type of woman. Middle-aged, financially comfortable, married to a trusting husband, feeling trapped in suburban life. The Muslim healer routine was just their latest innovation. In Phoenix, Tom had pretended to be a yoga instructor. In Albuquerque, Marcus had posed as a spiritual counselor. In Oklahoma City, Jerome had been a massage therapist specializing in energy healing. Sarah wasn't their victim. She was their partner. According to the emails, she would get 40% of whatever they managed to steal, plus help establishing a new identity wherever she wanted to go. Tom, Marcus, Jerome, and Ahmed would split the remaining 60% and move on to the next city, the next target. The last email in the folder was from Sarah to Tom, sent the morning before I woke up in Kansas. It's done. David will be devastated, but he'll survive. He's stronger than he thinks. Maybe this will be the push he needs to finally live a little. The Denver job netted us $847,000 total. Not bad for 4 months of work. I'll miss you all, but I'm ready for the next chapter. Morocco is going to be beautiful. Thank you for showing me who I really am. S. I spent that night in a cheap motel near the airport, lying awake and trying to figure out what to do next. I could call the police, but what crime had actually been committed? Sarah was my wife. She had legal access to our joint accounts. The house sale might have involved forged signatures, but proving that would be complicated and expensive. I could hire a private investigator to track her down, but with what money? Even if I found her, what then? Did I really want to drag her back to a marriage she clearly didn't want to be in? The hardest part wasn't the money or the house, or even the betrayal. The hardest part was accepting that the woman I'd been married to for 15 years had never really existed. The Sarah I'd fallen in love with, the Sarah I'd built a life with, the Sarah I'd worried about during her mysterious illness. That woman had been performance, a role she played until she got tired of playing it. 3 days later, I was back at work at Colorado Mutual Insurance, trying to pretend my life hadn't been completely destroyed. My supervisor, Jerry, pulled me aside after lunch. Dave, I got a weird call yesterday, he said. Some woman claiming to be your wife, asking about your life insurance policy. My blood ran cold. What did you tell her? Nothing, of course. I said she'd need to talk to you directly. But the thing is, she already seemed to know all the details. The policy amount, the beneficiary information, everything. How would she know that unless she'd seen the paperwork? She wouldn't, I said slowly. That's what I figured. I thought you should know, in case someone's trying to run some kind of scam. That night, I called the insurance company's fraud hotline and reported the suspicious inquiry. Within an hour, I got a call back from an investigator named Detective Lisa Morrison from the Denver Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. "Mr. Henderson, we've been looking for you," she said. "We've had reports of similar incidents in 5 other cities over the past 2 years. A group of con artists targeting married couples, specifically the wives. They call themselves the Collective. You know about them? We've been tracking them for 18 months. They're very good at what they do. They target couples with significant assets, use elaborate personas to seduce the wives, then disappear with everything they can steal. The problem is, the wives usually go willingly, which makes it hard to prosecute. But the forged signatures are definitely criminal. If you're willing to cooperate, we might be able to build a case. But I need to warn you, it's possible your wife will face charges too." I thought about Sarah's letter, about her claim that she'd done this for both of us, about her hope that I'd someday understand. "Detective Morrison," I said, "I want to help you catch these guys, but I need to know, is there any way to get my money back?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Henderson. The money is probably gone. These guys are professionals. They know how to move assets in ways that make recovery nearly impossible. But you can stop them from doing this to other people. That's a plan." I thought about some other man, somewhere in America, coming home to find his life destroyed the way mine had been. I thought about another woman being seduced into betraying 15 years of marriage for the promise of adventure and passion. "Then let's do it," I said. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that catching the Collective wouldn't give me back what I'd really lost. It wouldn't erase the knowledge that the woman I'd loved had never really loved me back. It wouldn't restore my faith in the 15 years we'd spent together, or my belief that I'd known her at all. The next morning, I got one final surprise. There was a package waiting for me at the front desk of the motel I'd been staying in. Inside was a single black sandal, delicate, size 6, with thin straps and a small heel. The same sandal Fatima had worn on her first visit to our house. Attached was a note. "I thought you might want a souvenir. T." I held the sandal in my hands and finally understood the full scope of what they'd done to me. Every detail had been planned, every moment orchestrated. Even this final gesture was designed to twist the knife one last time. But as I sat there holding that delicate black sandal, I realized something else. I was still here, broken, betrayed, financially ruined, but still here, still breathing, still capable of starting over. For the first time since waking up in that Kansas motel room, I felt something that wasn't despair or rage or self-pity. I felt free. 6 months later, I was sitting in a courtroom in downtown Denver, watching Tom Bradley, Marcus Williams, Jerome Patterson, and Ahmed al-Rashid being led away in handcuffs. The judge had sentenced each of them to 8 years in federal prison for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit theft across state lines. Detective Morrison had been right. They were professionals. The FBI investigation had uncovered evidence of similar cons in 12 cities across 7 states, with total damages exceeding $3 million. I wasn't their first victim, and I wouldn't have been their last if we hadn't stopped them. But Sarah was never found. The FBI traced her as far as Miami, where she boarded a flight to Casablanca using a passport in the name of Sandra Mitchell, a dead woman whose identity she'd somehow assumed. After that, the trail went cold. She had vanished into the vast expanse of North Africa with her share of the money, leaving no trace behind except the lives she'd helped destroy. I testified at the trial, telling my story to a packed courtroom, while Tom Bradley stared at me with cold, calculating eyes. During cross-examination, his lawyer tried to paint me as a neglectful husband who had driven his wife to seek emotional fulfillment elsewhere. "Isn't it true, Mr. Henderson, that you rarely took your wife out to dinner?" "We went out every Friday night for 15 years. I replied, "Always to the same place." "Usually to Romano's, yes. It was our favorite restaurant." "The same restaurant, the same booth, the same meals, week after week for 15 years. Would you call that romantic?" I looked at Tom Bradley, sitting at the defense table in his orange jumpsuit, and felt a surge of something I hadn't expected: pity. "I'd call it comfortable," I said. "I'd call it the kind of steady, reliable love that builds a life together." But apparently, that wasn't enough for Sarah. The lawyer pressed on. "You never took vacations, never surprised her with gifts, never." "Objection," the prosecutor interrupted. "Relevance." "Sustained," the judge ruled. But the damage was done. The defense had planted the seed of doubt they wanted to plant. Maybe I was partly to blame for what Sarah had done. Walking out of the courthouse that day, I ran into Maria, Sarah's cousin who had recommended Fatima in the first place. She looked older, worn down by guilt and the weight of her unwitting role in the con. "David," she called out as I reached the steps. "Please, can we talk?" I stopped and turned around. Maria's eyes were red-rimmed, and her hands shook as she approached me. "I need you to know," she said. "I had no idea. When Sarah asked me to recommend a healer, I thought I was helping. I never imagined—" "I know," I said quietly. "You were used just like I was. But I should have been more careful. I should have checked, should have asked more questions. Rosa, my friend who supposedly was cured by Fatima, she doesn't exist. I made her up because Sarah asked me to, and she said it was for a surprise for your anniversary. She said you've been wanting to try alternative medicine, but were too embarrassed to ask." Another lie. Another layer of deception I hadn't even known about. "She planned this for so long," Maria continued, tears streaming down her face. "She had me convinced that you were having an affair, that she needed to protect herself financially. She said she was gathering evidence for a divorce lawyer." I stared at Maria, processing this new information. Sarah had manipulated everyone around us, turning my wife's own family into unwitting accomplices. "What will you do now?" Maria asked. "I don't know." I admitted. "Start over, I guess." And that's exactly what I did. I moved into a small apartment in Capitol Hill, sold everything that reminded me of my life with Sarah, and used the money to start fresh. The insurance company had been surprisingly understanding about the whole situation. They even gave me a promotion and a raise after the trial, saying my experience with fraud would make me better at detecting others. They were right. I developed an eye for deception that served me well in my new role as a senior investigator. I could spot the telltale signs of insurance fraud from a mile away. The too perfect stories, the convenient timing, the emotional manipulation designed to make you stop asking questions. But the real healing came from an unexpected source. 8 months after the trial, I was investigating a suspicious claim in Thornton when I met Rebecca Chan, a physical therapist whose clinic had been burglarized. The thieves had stolen expensive equipment, and she was filing an insurance claim to replace it. Rebecca was everything Sarah hadn't been: direct, honest, uncomplicated. She said what she meant and meant what she said. When I asked her out for coffee after completing her claim, she said yes without games or manipulation. "You seem sad," she observed during our first date at a small cafe near her clinic. "Like you're carrying something heavy." I told her about Sarah, about the con, about waking up in a Kansas motel room to discover my life had been stolen. I expected pity or awkwardness, but Rebecca just nodded thoughtfully. "My ex-husband cleaned out our bank account and moved to Oregon with his secretary," she said. "Different method, same result. Some people are just broken in ways that make them incapable of real love. How do you trust again after something like that?" I asked. "Carefully," she said with a smile. "Very carefully. But you can't let one person's betrayal close you off to everyone else. That would be letting them win twice." Rebecca and I took things slowly. We dated for 2 years before I proposed, and even then I insisted on a prenuptial agreement, not because I didn't trust her, but because I needed to know I could protect myself if I was wrong about someone again. We married in a small ceremony at Red Rocks Amphitheater, with the Colorado mountains as our backdrop and 30 of our closest friends and family as witnesses. It was nothing like the elaborate church wedding Sarah and I had 15 years earlier, but it felt more real, more honest. Our marriage was built on a foundation of transparency that my first marriage had never had. We shared everything: bank accounts, passwords, fears, dreams. When Rebecca had a bad day at work, she told me about it instead of bottling it up. When I had nightmares about waking up in strange motel rooms, she held me until they passed. 3 years after we married, Rebecca gave birth to our daughter, Emma. Holding my child for the first time, I realized that everything I had lost with Sarah, the house, the money, the comfortable routine, had been replaced by something infinitely more valuable: a family built on truth. The FBI called me one more time, about 2 years ago. They received a tip that Sarah had been spotted in a cafe in Marrakesh, Morocco, but by the time their contacts in the Moroccan police investigated, she was gone again. The trail had gone cold once more. Part of me was relieved. I no longer wanted to see her face or hear her explanations. The woman I'd been married to for 15 years was gone. Maybe she never existed at all, and I had made peace with that. But I kept the black sandal Tom Bradley had sent me. not as a souvenir of my betrayal, but as a reminder of how easily we can be fooled when we want to believe something badly enough. It sits on my desk at work now, and whenever I'm investigating a claim that seems too neat, too convenient, too perfect, I look at that delicate black shoe and remember to ask the questions that matter. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not being more suspicious, not asking harder questions, not investigating Sarah's mysterious illness more thoroughly. The answer is complicated. I regret the 15 years I spent with someone who was ultimately a stranger. I regret the financial devastation that forced me to start over at 52. I regret the trust that was broken and the innocence that was lost. But I don't regret believing in love. I don't regret being the kind of person who takes people at face value, who trusts until given a reason not to, who assumes the best about others until proven wrong. Those qualities made me vulnerable to Sarah's deception, but they also made it possible for me to love Rebecca completely, without reservation, without the constant fear that she might be lying to me. The truth is, not everyone who comes into your life wearing a mask is trying to deceive you. Sometimes people hide their faces because they're afraid or hurt or simply different from what you expect. The trick is learning to tell the difference between someone who's hiding their true self to protect themselves and someone who's hiding their true self to harm you. If I could go back and give advice to the man I was before Sarah's mysterious illness began, I would tell him 3 things. First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is, even if you can't explain why. Second, real love doesn't require you to stop asking questions or stop being yourself. And third, the people who truly care about you will welcome your questions, your concerns, your need to understand. They won't try to make you feel guilty for wanting transparency. Sarah taught me that some people are capable of love, but not of fidelity. Others are capable of passion, but not of commitment. And a few, like Sarah herself, are capable of performance so convincing that even they might believe it's real. But Rebecca taught me something even more important, that it's possible to build a life with someone whose mask, if they wear one at all, is only there to protect the tender parts of themselves they're not ready to show the world yet. And when they're ready, when they trust you enough, they'll take off that mask willingly and show you who they really are. The difference between deception and privacy, between protection and manipulation, between mystery and dishonesty. These are the lessons I learned from a woman who came to my house in a black robe and changed my life forever. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever ignored warning signs in a relationship because you wanted to believe everything was okay? If this story resonated with you, please subscribe for more intense stories about love, betrayal, and the resilience of the human spirit.